But I had this just gut intuition that said, you will regret it if you don't pursue this option. And then what happened, because I said yes, like I'm not going to be the one to, turn the light red, I only hit green lights.
Hi, welcome to the Connect with Sheila podcast. I'm an entrepreneur, investor, health coach, mentor, and creator of the Seasons self-care app. I'm committed to helping you connect to your purpose, elevate your well-being, and build your version of a happy, successful life. It's interview day on the podcast, and I'm thrilled to be having our guest back a second time. Baird first shared her story in episode 127, Owning Your True Worth, about how she went from producing a top 20 podcast to launching her podcast and launching her own boutique podcast production company, Worthfull Media. She's back to share how a vision that came to her of designing her own podcast studio for creatives came to be in under a year. We talk what committing to your vision looks like in real time, the truth about growing your courage muscle, financing a project and building a team, how to hold your inherent personal value when starting something new that has no track record, and the green lights that can show up when you commit to trusting your intuition. Whether you're a solopreneur or just getting started, or you're an expert in your field wanting to launch into a new area, you'll get so many actionable gems from our conversation. Just listening might give you the dose of courage you've been needing to keep going after your dream. Enjoy. It is so good to see you, Christine.
Thank you. You as well.
It has been an exciting year for you. When did you first get the idea that you wanted your very own podcast space? And then when did you actually, from the time you decided you wanted that, how long was it before it actually manifested?
So I had this idea just the summer of 2021, and we're recording this in October 2022.
Amazing.
So like barely a year. I was walking around my neighborhood. I live in a really beautiful historic neighborhood in Salt Lake City, Utah. And I was kind of, I call it coming out of hibernation. I don't know if other people felt that way, but like coming out of like the intensity of a pandemic and the winter and everything, I was like coming back to life, but I still was very much like, what am I doing now? Like, what is my life now? So I had this idea walking around my neighborhood. You know what? I've worked in media production for so many years. I've worked with so many cool people, but I realize more and more what they need most is from me is to take care of everything, like to literally produce their entire media project from the beginning to the end. And I was like, the funnest, best way to do that would be to have a space to bring them to. So that's where it started. And I literally thought when I had the idea, oh, that's like something I'll do in 3 years, 4 years, something like that. Like so dream vision boardy, not in any way like, oh, and I'll be doing this now. So I just would walk around the neighborhood and like keep my eye out for like little spots that I was like, oh, that could be fun. And my neighborhood is mostly residential. So there's mostly not commercial spaces. But along came Thanksgiving time, and I walked by a building that had been under construction all year, but I'd never paid attention to it. And now it looked like something. And it had a for lease sign in front of it. And I called the number. And fast forward to June of this year, it was the first day my lease started, June 1st. And we officially like opened to the public on August 1st. And now it's October and I have a studio.
Congratulations. And we were just saying before we hit record that the irony, because it's so new, is that right now you're recording this from your home podcast studio because there's a few little tweaks that needed to be made and the contractors came in, which is I've been able to see your podcast studio by following you on the socials, and I'm on your email list, and it's so wonderful to watch, but it's so funny, right? This is how it goes.
So funny.
We flow with it. And what is really highlighted though about how this all came to be is highlighted with how you show up today, because you're like, I had to giggle because I couldn't be at the podcast studio for this interview, but you're smiling and you're laughing and you're like, oh, and I'm so lucky. I have this other podcast studio at home. And I think a lot of other people go through their life with like just their hands clenched, gripping on to the
Mm,
way things need to be. And I wonder, from what I know of you, it feels like that's not how you live your life. But I mean, it's certainly not the way the studio was manifested. Like it really feels like
no.
it was manifested
It was. That's the
playfully.
only way. That's the only way to describe it. I truly, when I, talked to the landlord for the very first time in November, I like looked at the space and it was a shell. I mean, it was like concrete, no electricity, like barely that it was still under construction. And I could just tell. I was like, this is going to be such a fantastic space. And for a lot of reasons, it was like a really great location for a studio for media production. A lot of what I do is video. And so I was like, oh, this would be great. And when I like looked at my business, I was like, oh, I am nothing on my business, on paper looks like I'm ready to have a brick and mortar studio. But I had this just gut intuition that said, you will regret it if you don't pursue this option. And so the whole time I pursued it, I was fully prepared at any moment for there to be like a red light. And I'd be like, great, that was like the practice run. Like that just prepped me for 2 years from now. And then what happened because I said yes, like I'm not going to be the one to, turn the light red. I only hit green lights. Like over 6, 8 months. I'm talking like, business loan applications, cash flow projections, business plans, commercial lease negotiations. By the way, the week I was supposed to sign the lease, the building next door caught fire and burned. Like a freak fire
What?
happened next door. My building was completely unharmed. But we pushed everything back 2 months because the owner was like, oh my gosh, we've just had a catastrophe. Like, I've got to figure out, reconstruction. Like, there were
Wow.
so many things that would have easily been like, nope, not now, not yet, not this. And yet, if I had been the one to say that, I would not have a studio. Like, I needed to trust that there was like a bigger plan going on. And when that many green lights lined up, I was like, well, I'm not going to be the one to say no. If nobody else said no, then I will not be the one to say no. But that was a huge part of it. It was definitely manifestation at a really remarkable level. And in no way did I do it alone, right? Like I manifested like a microloan fund who was really into supporting like female entrepreneurs early stage, a loan officer who got the vision, the landlord of the property who just like has been on my team from day one. It's like a primo property in an amazing neighborhood. Like so many people wanted that space. She chose me. I was like, oh my gosh, okay. Like those were sorts of things that I was like, oh, okay. Like I get it. People more than just me are seeing that this is a good thing. And yes, it's on my shoulders to prove that that's true. But it was such a cool experience because I really early on realized this is not something I will be doing by myself.
That is so powerful, knowing that it wasn't just you, and also
Mm-hmm.
knowing that really, truly, it was you
It
because it was
was. It
your
wasn't. It
vision
wasn't.
and it was your energy with how you show up. If
Mm-hmm.
you were a different type of person, perhaps, maybe the vision would not have been caught by these other people. The way
Yeah.
we show up, the energy we project, that is really who we are, not trying to be someone else. That is so powerful. And I feel like I've been looking at this a lot lately, how we cultivate our energy and how we really are mindful about the way we're living our lives, how in alignment we are with the work that we're doing, with the life that we're living, and knowing that that is everything. Because our
Yeah.
energy is going to be so different if it's like, well, somebody else I should do this.
Yeah.
Or, my mom always said that this is what I should do. Your energy is going to show up differently than if it's something that's birthed really, I feel like in your case, from the divine. Because
Yeah.
based on our last podcast
Yeah.
conversation, and everybody go back and listen to the podcast, it was 127 of this podcast talking about how Christine got her start in
Mm-hmm.
podcasting And there's just so much to it. And I really believe, like, from the time you and I met, your energy was the thing that captivated me. And it's
Mm,
not like you're very, you have a positive energy, but it's also a very calm and soothing energy, right? It's not like hype, hype, hype. It's so genuine. And I think that comes across. And so this is kind of a lesson for me, but for all of us, as we're thinking about those things that we want to move through and into and how to go about it. And I love how you said you were not going to be the one to put the red light up. Imagine if we lived our lives that way. I'm just picturing this and looking at my own past experiences and some things I'm playing with creatively. If I just take that step forward and then have the attitude that, okay, if a red light, like a true red light comes up, okay, maybe I'm meant to pivot and go in a different direction, but I'm just going to put one foot in front of the other.
mm,
And like, do you find that helped you not have as much stress? Like, what kind of stress has been involved in this process for
hmm.
you? How have you managed that?
The biggest stress was like facing the fear. And that happened really early on because once I realized that the space was available and I'd like met the owner, I was like, oh, I've got to figure out if I can, get funding and like figure out the financials. And so part of that process was doing like a lot of number crunching because if you've ever applied for a commercial loan, like they need to see a ton of numbers. And I'd had my business for a few years, so it's like I had some, reports and finances to show, but that was the process. It was like December, January, February when I was just deep in the numbers and I was so terrified because I was like I have to prove first to myself that I think these numbers make sense. And then I've got to make a case to a, bank. And that was a terrifying process because I realized if I commit to this, it is like way bigger than anything I've done as far as overhead. Like I've had a remote company for the whole time I've been working in media and very little overhead. And now I was looking at like these spreadsheets and these cash flow projections and I was like, ooh.
It's a
So
different world.
it was a very different world. And I truly had to like face the fear. And I knew that's what was happening. Like you said, I had to take it one step at a time because if I like, there were many nights where I would just like be awake in the middle of the night, like literally doing math in my head, but also, I don't know if anyone else does this.
Oh my
You're
gosh,
really
yes.
focused on something and you like dream, sleep all the time, the numbers. But that was so essential. And I knew it was essential. I would not call it fun. I would call it necessary. And then there came a point where I like, submitted an application because that was my first step. I was like, well, let me see what kind of funding I have available because I don't want to, pie in the sky, go to the landlord and be like, oh, yeah, I can do this. And I don't know how. And so that was where the terror was faced. And by the time, I got a loan offer from the bank, I was like, okay, I faced the fear and now I'm ready to make a decision. So that was a hugely stressful, and it had nothing to do with anyone but me and my own head and my own relationship with myself. Because, like I said, I was really confident in certain parts of my abilities because I have a long track record of doing certain things really well. This was a new thing. And I was
Yeah.
like, oh, am I good at running this kind of a business? Am I good at sourcing this kind of, sales revenue? Am I good at like marketing on this level? Um, so that was huge. And by the time it came for me to decide, when like the landlord and the loan officer were both like, yeah, if you want it, you got it, but like let us know soon. I was like, okay. At that point, I did have a moment of truth with myself. And I was like, okay, you face the fear, you understand the numbers and the what's going to be required is like, what's your choice? And that was less stressful because, I'd had a few months to like work through the jitters, but it was definitely a moment of truth because I was like, if I sign these legal documents, like, you know, there's
It's real
consequences.
now.
There are contracts in place. And it was very powerful to choose into that because I knew from that moment forward, it wasn't about deciding whether or not to do it. It was about figuring out how to do it. And that the stress levels have decreased since then because now I'm by human design, I'm a generator. And so if I'm excited about something, I can just create endlessly, right? But I had to get to the point of excitement. And part of the process for me was first moving through the terror And then saying, okay, we're committing. It's no longer about whether or not we're doing it. We're figuring out how. Have I had many stressful moments since then? Yes, but they haven't been as like intense because I already made the decision. And now I'm like, you know what? There are greater powers at work. Try like behind making this a beautiful, successful contribution to my, industry or to my circle. So when I have the tough days now, I'm like, but think of all the things that led to this point. There's, you know, there is more strength and resource and help available to you, than just you. And that's the current moment. I mean, I'm right in the marathon now. The studio's open. Now I get to fill it with people, bring in the sales. So it's been a very helpful perspective to realize like you face the terror, you made the choice. Now let's just figure out how we're going to make it happen.
It has been so inspirational to watch the journey. And really, like, as you've been moving through it, no one would ever know that that's been your experience because you're sharing, you're like sharing the
Yes.
points of
Yeah.
and of course that's always the case. And so what a beautiful reminder for everybody listening that no matter who you're seeing, whether they're on social, whether they're in an email, or whether like there's somebody down the street or in your building where you work, like what is it taking for them to get up in the morning and to keep going after their dream? Like it's
Oh,
everything. And what I also love is how you took the steps forward to look at the financing options available to you, which
mm,
is very frightening if you've never done it before.
mm-hmm,
And also let's face it, being a woman, right? Who
mm-hmm,
for how long has
mm-hmm.
it been in the States? I don't know what it's been in Canada either, but for a woman to actually be able to, have a
I
line of
think it was
credit.
like I think it was not until the 1970s that a woman in the US could have a credit card without a husband co-signing.
Right. And so we're carrying that
Yeah.
fear of are we really able to carry
Yeah.
this? And yet you
Right.
didn't let that stop you. And that was maybe perhaps somewhere buried inside of you, like many of us it is.
Mm-hmm.
And you also looked beyond, even though you'd done it before. Okay, I'm going to bootstrap because so
Mm-hmm.
many of us women will bootstrap, and not think about these other options. I recently sat in on a beautiful masterclass sharing where the expert was sharing about really all of the options that are available for these types of things for financing our dreams that very
Mm-hmm.
often we don't look at because
Yeah.
of the ancestral trauma perhaps, and also just not
Yes.
being aware unless we have been raised in like an MBA or something like that. And
Mm-hmm.
frankly, I don't even know, like so many people who have MBAs have said to
Yeah.
me, there's so much that they don't teach you when you're getting your MBA. I'm like,
Right.
oh, interesting. Okay. So
Yep.
I don't feel so bad for not having one. So I'll just, surround myself with people who are smarter than me and they can just, give me the heads up. And the other thing is, you know, your your history in growing your business, like prior to that time, and even during that time, you've worked with some incredible people, like highly renowned individuals who are in the public eye. And you've learned so much from them by working with them, by supporting them. And I love how you're taking those and you're applying that to building your dream. Like I really feel like it's like those seeds were planted and then you're blossoming into that even further. And as a result, creating more inspiration for the people who are watching you and perhaps who have a desire to do something similar.
Ugh. Well, I really can't stop smiling because it's so beautiful to receive that feedback. Like, thank you. I take that in and it means so much. You're right. Like, we talked about this, I think, on our previous conversation on your show. I felt my entire 8 years of, my media career, I felt so, so, so lucky. Like, very, very, very privileged to work with people and in circumstances and on shows that are just really cool and extraordinary. And I've just had some amazing experiences. And over the last couple of years, as I really sat with myself about like, what am I supposed to do with all this extraordinary opportunity I've been given? I felt the responsibility of that like deeply, especially because I work in media and we all know media is a real double-edged sword. And if you're not careful, you will just create a lot of stuff that causes a lot of harm and or, the slow death of self-esteem. And so I sat with that all of last year. I really was sitting in like deep kind of meditation about why have I been given all these opportunities? Like, what is my purpose that's unique from, another media producer? And it really did come down to very close to what you said. That's why it's so cool to hear you say that because I made that decision before the studio. I was like, okay, there is a reason I've been given these opportunities. I don't think I know there are people who want to make better media less often with more worth, a sustainable way that truly is here to serve, and they need help, and they need a lot of help because media production can be a lot. And I've been given those skills and experiences, and there's a reason why. And that was the beginning. And so I'm so happy that that's what's come through. Like from you following my work, that's my, anchor point now. If I wasn't anchored into providing that service and that option for people in media production, I would totally have just gotten a job. I would have just like gone to a network and gotten a job at this point because that would have been so much easier. But I know that there's a bigger purpose to the opportunities I've been given. And do I know exactly what it is? No, but it's, unfolding before me as time happens. So that's been part of the process too, is like trusting that the understanding I have of my purpose today is enough. And then I'll have more understanding tomorrow.
Absolutely. That's something we can all take to heart as we go about whatever the things we're working on are. The knowledge that as long as we're moving in the direction of something that lights us up, like I'm a manifesting generator, so that
Mm-hmm.
energy, that gut response, very important. My son is a generator, and
Oh.
he brings the vibe, and he brings the vibe, but he's got that grounded chill kind of
Mm.
nature like yourself, which is very interesting.
Mm.
I know a few generators like that. So that I just find human design so fascinating.
I know.
But following our bliss and then
Yeah.
making sure that we take the space to really tune in. Like no matter what design we are or no matter
Mm-hmm.
what work we're doing, it is really about opening up some space in our life to get quiet enough to hear our own thoughts, our own voice. Like I love listening to podcasts too, right? Like when you start a podcast, the person is also listening to a lot of podcasts. So it's important for me to have the boundary up of having a lot of
Mm-hmm.
quiet time as well to really hear my own thoughts and to generate those things that I feel I'm led to be doing. And all of us need that space because there's so much coming at us, especially
Mm-hmm.
now. Like it's only going to ramp up more. So being able to tune into that is so important. I would love to know, like, what are some of the highlights that you've really learned about yourself as you've moved through this process? Like some things that stand out to you that you like a strength you didn't know you had, or maybe even a fear you didn't know you had that you then have overcome.
This is such a beautiful question because I haven't really had a container to share my answer with anyone. I think about it all the time because obviously I live with myself, but I don't think anyone's asked me that. And I'm like, oh, I have an answer. One of the things that's been top of mind for me throughout this entire year is my courage to keep going. And I really did set my intention at the start of 2022. It was like, New Year's Day. And I was like, what's my intention this year? And I wrote courage to create. And I knew, even at that moment, I was like, oh, this is going to be real. And that has 100% something I've learned about myself because I've never pushed myself to this level of leadership, obviously, like growing a team and uh, being the face of a business and understanding I need to have a more robust business structure now, but also like taking on the responsibilities I have in the last year, both financially or, socially, contractually. I have had to have so much courage, and it's been a really cool experience at times, not exactly pleasant, but it's been powerful, and it's been really amazing for me to see where my courage comes from because there have been so many days where I'll wake up and be like, "Oh my gosh, I have got some very big things I have to figure out." And the timeline is pretty much today. Like these things have to get figured out today. And I don't know how I'm going to figure them out, but I have the courage to get up in the morning and go for it. And that has happened to me time and time again this year. Like, I don't even know how many times. And I didn't know that about myself until this year because I had never pushed myself um, in the container of like, as we know, your work is tied to your income, which is tied to like your survival. So it's kind of like higher stakes than normal. I would say I've learned about my courage socially before. Anyone who's dated and gotten married, like that takes a lot of courage. But this is like different stakes. Like now I'm learning about how I am courageous when my business is on the line, my finances are on the line, my, professional reputation, my social reputation as it relates to, the work I do. And that has been amazing because I didn't know how much courage I had. And now I know I have a lot more courage than I realized. And I think the other thing I would share that I've learned about myself is I have a very deep well of strength to keep going during hard things. Like completely unrelated to work, this year has been tough, I think, for everyone, but I'll include myself in that. Like just tough stuff's been going on. And there's been definite days where I'm like, this is super heavy. Like, this is heavy. And I'm acknowledging it's heavy. And I think anyone who looked at my life right now would consider it heavy. But again, I've found a different level to the depth of my like inner strength because what's happened as a result of facing some like really just tough life stuff in the same time as like building a business and taking on a lot of like responsibility and risk is even when I'm sort of pushed to the max, like, holy moly, this is intense. I want to go crawl into bed. I've learned that I will still find the beauty. I will still be kind to myself. I will still like give it over to God because what else are you going to do at that point? And I will still see joy in my day. And that's been profound. Like, yes, I'm an optimist. Like, that's how most people know me, but I've never been pushed to the extremes I've been pushed to this year. So I was like, oh, what happens when that happens? And that's been really amazing to see in myself. And I'm grateful for your question so that I can practice acknowledging myself. Uh, I just know it, I know what's going on in my life. I know what's going on in my head and my heart. And there have been multiple times where I've realized like you have the choice. And when you have the choice, you choose to see the good, see the beauty, practice gratitude, have hope. Those have been like really amazing discoveries about myself. And I am glad to know that's who I am. Like, I am so grateful that's who I am because it is getting me through.
I am so grateful for your response because we need to hear things like this more. We need to hear women celebrating the things that they are learning about themselves, the things that they've
Yeah.
come through. We need more of that because for too
Yes.
long we've kept a lid on that kind of stuff. And that's where, so much stress and competition and all that stuff comes from, but we need to celebrate. And once we start celebrating what we're accomplishing, other people actually gain the ability to step into their next level too, because we all have another level. We have another level of where we can rise to. And I love how you shared how
Mm-hmm.
we have another level to how we can be held through the bottom stuff, like another
Mm-hmm.
level. And I fully relate to you. It's been a real grief journey for me over the last decade. And people, it just brings up this conversation of, you know how do you hold it all, and
Mm-hmm.
what is okay, culturally, for us to show up as. Aren't we
Yeah.
supposed to, if something hard's going on or something sad's going on, is it okay to be happy? Is it okay to be joyful? This is like the continual conversation I have, and I've been having for like a decade. We can hold it both, and we can't
Yeah.
say it enough, because
Yeah.
yes, I'm an optimist too.
Mm-hmm.
And it's optimism born out of like a really difficult time growing up with mental health in my home.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, interesting. And I'm only kind of becoming aware of some of this stuff,
Mm-hmm.
but I realize when I see it in others, it's like it's so much a part of all of our lives if we really look at it. And so I'm grateful that you're having this thought and sharing it, because it's just another voice saying, look, we
Yeah.
can do, like they say, you can do the hard thing and you can
Mm-hmm.
actually have joy in the journey. Otherwise, like, it's just work, and it's just like,
Yeah.
what's the point? We should be able to do both.
That's such a great way of putting it. And I know that's true because I've heard many people talk about grief and like extreme hardship that way. And I know it's true. And I've lived it. Like I've lived a year where there were things that were really heavy and hard going on. And I felt joy and peace and hope and grace and comfort and strength, like at the exact same time. Like I'm crying. I'm literally crying, and I feel that. And sometimes, you cry and then it feels like the other feelings come because you need the catharsis, but
Yes.
sometimes it happens at the same time. That is so powerful. I'm thinking of two super mini stories that are so good at illustrating the same thing. One, Brene Brown just released a podcast episode in September on her Unlocking Us show. That was the first podcast she'd released since she had taken a whole summer off, and she'd never done that before. She'd taken a sabbatical, and she recorded a solo episode just explaining why the sabbatical, what happened during the sabbatical, where she's at now. And I totally recommend it for anyone who is interested in like how do people who have like massive success, massive platforms, massive audiences, like how do they handle it? Listen
Mhm.
to that episode because she does not hold back.
I love
She
how
is
she doesn't hold
so, I mean, she is who she is, right? Like if she held back, where would we be? Because we're
back.
like, Brene, you taught us how to be vulnerable. But that is such a powerful story. And it's not a long episode, it's like 20 minutes, but I can't recommend it highly enough because it is a perfect example of her being like, listen, you all think I'm the expert on these things. And I have been in like deep grief, deep crisis, like deep struggle. And I literally was so burnt out. I was so overdue for a break and I'm barely like starting to put the pieces back together. And then two, I'm thinking, and I might have shared this on our first conversation. I can't remember because it always comes to mind when we talk about this. But I remember hearing the actress who plays Trinity in the Matrix trilogy, Carrie Ann Moss. Did I tell you this story
You may
before?
have, but tell it again because I
Okay,
love
if
it.
so, sorry if we're repeating everybody listening. So she was on a podcast I produced years ago, and I remember her telling this story, and I like it has never left me. One, because I was like, it's Trinity from the
Yes.
Matrix, like whatever she says must. But Carrie Ann Moss is like a very spiritually evolved, like mindful human.
She
But she
is.
said when she first moved to LA, as a young 20 something to pursue acting, she's Canadian. She moved down there from Canada and she was like, working in a coffee shop and barely making and like, just the life of the 20 something of trying to make it in acting in LA. This is before the Matrix happened. And she's like, I would go home at night to this like tiny little shoebox apartment, a back corner of somebody who knew somebody. And she's like, I would be journaling. And she was like, I would just write over and over in my journal, you are worthy, you are worthy, you are worthy, you are worthy. And that was like her practice to have enough, stamina and strength to like get up the next day, go work at the cafe, go to the auditions, endless auditions that actors have to do. And I have just never forgotten her saying that because I was like, that is what it sometimes takes. Like every morning, no matter what kind of day you're facing, what kind of like things are out of your control or uncertain or feel overwhelming, it's like, well, I'm going to sit with my journal and just write, like, you are a good person. You is smart, you is kind, like, you is worthy. Like, literally, sometimes that is what gets you just enough confidence to keep going. And sometimes that's because of grief, like we talked about. Sometimes it's because of like growth, right? It's not always like, so it's like I've chosen into growth this year, and that's been a catalyst. So, yeah, I can't remember actually how we got there, but I felt like those two stories were relevant at some point.
They're very relevant at no matter what point. And
Okay.
what I love too is how when you're looking at moving into another level of something, like you said, your word was courage this year.
Mm-hmm.
And I've heard other people share on this, and this has happened to me. It's like, oh, wait a second. If I'm asking for courage, that means there's going to be some things I got to go through because you can't be
Yeah.
courageous unless you're doing something scary, right? It's not
Right.
like, boom, all of a sudden there's courage and there's no more fear. No, no, no. You build the
No,
courage walking through the fear.
that's
It's
literally the only
crazy.
way I've ever seen it work. Like there's courage that you could say is courage, but it usually is like pure ignorance. Like you
Yeah,
literally don't know what you're facing, so you can't be afraid of it.
that's
Like
almost better.
naivete, which is like a blessing in a way. And then there's the courage of like, there is no way for me to find out what's possible until I literally do the thing I'm most scared of. And there's no way around it. You just got to do it.
Something I've been saying to myself when I wake up in the morning, around when I meditate, because I've always done like a prayer meditation, and I'm trying some different types of meditation now, like really first thing. And one thing I've said is like, today has never happened before. Like
Oh.
today has never happened before. And it's helping me when I get stuck in the story of I'm going to take a step forward in my courage, and to stop thinking about, yeah, but last time this is what happened, or yesterday this is what happened. It's like, well, no, but today has never happened before. So I get to show up differently. I get to try something different. And it can be a better outcome. It can be a different outcome. I can
Mm.
learn. And so it puts me in that learning posture. And these conversations are so powerful because I think every single one of us goes through stuff like this. And also, every single one of us will look at like people who we respect, we admire in whatever field, and think, oh, I mean, we know they didn't have it easy, but it's like, oh, they make it look so effortless.
Totally.
No, 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 no. That just means they had more stuff to walk through to get to the courage. And like you
Yeah.
said earlier, you're strong and successful in certain areas of your life, and you've had successes, but this is new. So you're like, I'm being willing to be a brand new at this. And that means it can be scary. And then, hey, look at every new thing that has happened. Like there's new inventions happening all the time. And we'll hear about them. We'll be like, what an awesome idea. Like somebody thought of that. And then
Mm-hmm.
they made it happen. And that, whatever it might be, wow, that's to get the engineers to do those things. That's very expensive. Like how, and they didn't know it was going to work. And so if we look at that and say, okay, well, what thing do I want to do? And on what scale? Like anything is possible. It really, really is. There's enough evidence around us. If other people can make these things happen, so can we. And
Mm-hmm.
so, this is your level right now. And who knows what this will lead to? Like I have visions for, I'm sure you have visions for what it'll turn into. But as you share about it, I'm like,
Yes.
ooh, oh, this could be interesting. There could be, little franchises here and there. Oh, yes, a lot of different things could happen.
Mm-hmm.
And I love how when you shared about Carrie Ann Moss's story and when she wrote, I'm worthy, I'm worthy, I'm worthy. And then here you have the Worthfull Project,
I
your
know.
podcast, your that is the underpinning of everything you do. And
Yeah.
how have you found that has been something that has helped you feel held? Just knowing, I am worthy,
Mm-hmm.
as so that you can move forward.
That for me is the whole foundation. Like if I didn't feel worthy of what I'm doing, it would have crumbled a long time ago. It has to be the foundation for me. Um, Learning about the concept of self-worth, which I kind of first really dug into several years ago when I was living in LA and doing a lot of self-development stuff, was really a pivotal moment because I was like, oh, self-worth is not about how other people value you. It's about how you value yourself. And when I dug deeper and deeper and deeper in those early years of, like you mentioned, my podcast, and then, I ended up deciding to sort of make my professional company and brand based in the world of worth. I was like, there is so much more that can happen when we respect our worth independent of our results. And for me in business, like for example, we've talked about this year, it's been essential because as anyone who's ever like started a business or launched a bigger venture or like made, stretched into a big new chapter, you don't have the results yet. Like you just don't have them. So you literally have to believe in your worth independent of results. Because if you look at the statistics, most businesses like they do not succeed. And they also do not just like take off like a rocket ship on day one. The ones that succeed typically take, 10 plus years and lots of things and lots of failure. So, what has been so, so helpful for me in this chapter of my life is to have spent a few years really understanding and exploring and talking to people about, like, okay, what is self worth? Why is it valuable? How do I nourish it? Because, not to go off on a tangent, but like, there's a difference between the way value your worth and the way that your worth actually is. And unfortunately, it kind of, if we don't have a quality self-worth, it kind of doesn't matter what your real worth is because you don't see it. And if you
Yeah.
don't see your worth, it's a lot harder to put it to work. And so that's been so, 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 so valuable to me this year, especially in the face of a lot of uncertainty, starting something new, being like, I really cannot guarantee how this is going to go. And my worth is intact regardless. And that's been a big part of learning self care in a new way this year. Like, no matter what happened during the week, no matter like the yeses, the nos, the sales numbers, the team management, the answers that came, the answers that are still unclear. I have had the opportunity every night and every weekend. I'm very good about taking off on the weekends. I really don't work at all. I'm really good about not working at night. Like, that's an essential for me. And like when those laptop closes down, emails off, I'm like, well, we're back to just me being full of worth. Like, I've got to separate my identity from whatever happened in the business because there's just way too much uncertainty if you're in a growth period. You don't know what's going to happen. You don't have the results to prove anything yet. So that's been essential, I would say, for me in all of life, but especially in this chapter.
Oh, so powerful. We need to all take something from that, especially those listening who are solopreneurs, who have a side hustle. And so you're using every spare moment to get something off the ground or to grow
Mm-hmm.
it. How much time are people taking to step away, get into a different level of creativity or quiet or fun to really reconnect to who they are and that true inherent worth that
Yeah.
exists no matter what they do?
Yeah.
So important.
And just like as another note, if this is helpful to anyone listening, there is something that's been super helpful for me about understanding the economic system I live in. Not to like go off on a big tangent, but like I live in the US, it's a capitalist economy, like it's a, democracy. It's only been around for a couple hundred years, like as a current institution of government and laws and finance and blah, blah, blah. And so it's been really helpful for me when I'm having my days of like, oh my gosh, like, comparisonitis or like, why haven't I figured this out yet? Or how am I going to figure this out? It's just been so helpful to realize like when it comes to being a business owner and you're in a growth period, the system will obviously ultimately always function just on like exchange of dollars. So it's really easy to think your value is only as great as like how many dollars came your way. But it has been very helpful to like educate myself a little bit more this year on like, how does capitalism work? What is valued? Where's the focus placed? Because then I can understand the messaging coming at me
Mm-hmm.
instead of being like, oh my gosh, if I don't have $1 million at the end of my first year of business, I'm a failure. That's clearly the messaging I'm getting. And then I'm like, oh, that's just the messaging because of like the economic system you live in. And yes, I do live in a capitalist economy. Like, I need to respect that. Like, I gotta work within the system I live in. But it's been very helpful to realize, like, because of the kind of economy I live in, a certain kind of messaging is sent my way, and I can have, like, the eyes to see it. And then when I need to just be like, thank you for the information. And also, that has nothing to do with like the thing I'm working on right now, because I know the vision of where I'm heading. So that's been really helpful too. And I've just appreciated a lot of the like authors and experts who are teaching business owners about how to understand capitalism so that it doesn't eat you alive versus like, the good things about capitalism, like the opportunities to create and not be sort of, anyway, I'll cut it off there because obviously that's a whole other tangent, but it's been very helpful.
Well, and as a piece to that conversation, like you and many others, there's like a grassroots movement that's coming through of shifting really how we look at all
There
of that.
is.
You know,
Yeah.
we're having this conversation. This never used to be talked about.
Never was
So
I ever.
because
No, I was never
right.
talking to anyone about this like 5 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, it's just recent in recent years, and so you are an example in what you're doing, and many of the listeners and people who you're working with as well are an example of, hey, look, how do we extrapolate our worth? Let's look at it a little differently. Just because
Right.
this is how it is, like this is the system, doesn't mean how it always needs to be. And we don't
Yeah.
have to, like, yes, there's some boxes right now we need to check, but we can be part of changing things, the
Yeah.
beginning part of changing things. Like, I have so much hope for future generations. I mean, already you just look at like the way YouTubers are making money,
Yeah.
and just changing the conversation and changing like what it looks like to be successful. And actually, oh my goodness, young people being extremely philanthropic too. What? So
Yeah.
it's very hopeful. Of course, we always see the spectrum. Life is
Mm-hmm.
always filled with the spectrum, but there are those bright lights who are doing things differently. And it's just an exciting time to be alive. And I love that my
It
teenage sons
is.
are seeing that because they have a different view of really
Yeah.
what abundance is because of that and how
Yeah.
they can fit into it. They don't have to fit into a box. They're like, well, wait, what are my unique abilities and how can I create my own future? Like it's an interesting conversation to be in. Oh
So
my goodness.
cool.
Well, this has been wonderful. And I would love for you to share a little bit more about like, okay, tell me about the studio. Tell me about what you're looking to do there, who it's for, how you serve, all that good stuff.
Well, with pleasure. Okay. So my company is called Worthfull Media, and we're a boutique production house that makes, podcasts and YouTube series, audio and video for experts. And our studio, we call it Worthfull Studios, but really it's the same company, is based in Salt Lake City. And we have clients who fly in and come to us from all over. And we obviously have local clients who we love. And it is really a video first studio. So you and I both absolutely love podcasting and have podcasted from our homes for years. And I'm all about it. Obviously, that's literally what we're doing today.
Yeah.
But the demand that I kept hearing about from clients and I wasn't seeing a fit and why I wanted to create a studio was when you want to create something very beautiful and quality that reflects your full worth, that took time in a good way, and that you don't do that often. This is something that, like, this is a studio for when you're like, I have a master class or I have a limited series or I need to create a course or a really important piece project, like a media project, and I want it to be filmed really high quality. And I need it to be produced by people who get it, who have a background in online business, understand personal brands, understand thought leadership and expertise in social media and YouTube and podcasting. Like they need to understand all of that. And I also need them to support me fully in the production, meaning like they guide me in how to even conceive of putting together the series. They help me with all the content. They hire the crew. They have the gear. They set up the studio. They style the set. I come in, they coach me on how to be the best on camera. We make sure that like the messaging we're recording actually aligns with the brand. We have a strategy for a launch. We make sure that we're not spending too much money based on what the return on investment we're planning. Like it's a very much that project, which if you worked in online business or any kind of business, like there are so many projects people want to do and they're just like, I can't do it by myself and I don't know who to hire.
Yeah.
That is what the studio is for. And so, like things we've shot already this summer, this will be helpful if you're trying to wrap your head around it. We shot like a 10-episode mini series for a client designed specifically for YouTube. She's a compassionate leadership facilitator. So her clients are corporations. They bring her in to do facilitations, and she has a wealth of expertise and experience. We're like, let's record, 5-minute mini episodes that are designed for YouTube. We batch recorded them in 2 days. We did an awesome shoot and it was incredible. Like we prepared her, she was prepared, her team was prepared. She came in from California and like it was amazing. It just launched this week. It's so fun to finally see it out in the world. So
Right.
we literally were supporting from pre-production all the way through launch. Like we did the editing, we did the recording, we guided her on launch strategy. And then another really fun project we did just last month. This would be more if you were like a podcaster, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
We shot a season of actually podcast I co-host with my longtime coworker, but we did over 2 days, and we did sort of episodes where we had guests come in. So we got to feature guests in every episode, which was a blast for us. And so it was more designed as a podcast style shoot, but we're going to put it on YouTube and the podcast apps, and it's educational. So I mean, this is getting meta, but my company teaches experts who are established in their field how to show their best content through media.
Mm-hmm.
So those are just a couple ideas. I know I've learned enough from working in media that it can be really hard to understand the jargon without like, what is it? Was it really you're making? So those are kind of the projects and the vision. And it's truly our delight to host people in our studio. I wanted to make it a hospitality experience because that was my background from being a producer in LA. And so it's just been so fun. We literally welcome you into our home, so to speak, and take care of you all the way. And then, the idea is like, this is the sort of media that you could just make, 2 or 3 times a year, maybe once a year, and it can serve you for the entire year. It can serve your audience. It's the good stuff. So you don't have to make it as often because it lasts a lot longer.
So great. And Salt Lake City is such an incredible place. Like it's a wonderful place to fly into. It's convenient. And there's great restaurants. Like I've gone to so many conventions there. My direct selling company, Sana, is there. And so years and years and years.
Yes.
So yeah, love Salt Lake. And the vibe.
It's such a great
everybody
place.
Is so nice.
Everyone's so nice. And there's a really calm energy because of the mountains. Like if you've never lived in like a valley surrounded by really big mountains, it is like the feeling of being held.
It is.
And
it's so grounding.
It's so grounding. And I love bringing clients out here because it's way chiller than New York or LA. And when you're recording something and you're the talent, you need to really have focus and energy. Like you're there to deliver. And so I was like, I love bringing people to Salt Lake because you're not distracted by the magic and glamour of a huge city, but like you can focus in and we can really take care of you.
Mm-hmm. And the mountains are there, as you mentioned. So you can always like tack on a ski trip.
Yes. 100%.
Like, oh my gosh, you can have so much fun year round.
Yes. Yes.
Oh, well, I'm thrilled that you're doing this. And from the moment you started talking about it, I was getting so excited for you. So I can't wait for people to hear this episode and for the makers and the solopreneurs and the other business owners who are realizing just the beautiful value of video as they are presenting their businesses and marketing. It's just so nice to know there is an option with someone so skilled. You've been doing this for so long and you've been on all sides of it.
Yeah.
So you have an understanding of being the talent and of being the producer and everything in between.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's amazing. So
thank you. It really does feel like the synthesis of so many chapters in my life. And I'm just so grateful to have the opportunity to serve in this way because that's what's fulfilling to me. And just thank you again. I feel so encouraged and cheerleaded. It is such a blessing to like spend time with you today.
Well, thank you for being here. And to everyone listening, please check out the show notes. You're going to see all of the links to the ways you can connect with Christine and the Worthfull magic that exists in her media company and at the studio. And we'd also love to hear what piece of our conversation landed with you the most. We love it if you'd shout it out on Instagram. You'll see our links there in the show notes as well. Send us a DM, whatever the case. And we would love to hear. So have a beautiful rest of your day. Big blessings.